Hey all, just a very brief introductory video to this next module, Module 8 on federal and Nevada executive branch politics. So we've talked, right, about the American presidency, Module 7. A separate but obviously overlapping module, right, are federal bureaucratic politics. The president, of course, right, under the Article 2 language of the Constitution, is the chief executive of the federal bureaucracy. Um, so you can see the relationship. But it's also true, right? At least historically, although it's rapidly changing even as I speak, historically there's been a certain amount of independence to the actions of the federal bureaucracy. Yes, the president is ultimately the boss of that entity, but typically that entity has been given many degrees of freedom to use their expertise, professionalism, and competence to do good work for the country. And we'll see that it's always a tricky thing in a democracy. Excuse me. Between right in the case of the federal bureaucracy, we do want excellence from them, right? Professionalism, expertise, hired not because of who the president is, but because of how good they are at their job. But on the other hand, right, we also want democratic accountability to we the people. So you have to sort of balance those two things in terms of how the federal bureaucracy should function in our constitutional democracy. Because, you go old school, early days of the American Republic, when the federal government wasn't that large or powerful and the bureaucracy was not that large. Yeah, typically you got your job because of who the president was, and was he one of your buddies? Was he going to give you a job because you supported him in an election campaign? Were you known for being deeply loyal to the president? Sure, patronage, right? Classic patronage politics. That's how the federal bureaucracy was staffed by and large up until about the middle of the 19th century. But as America became more developed and more technologically sophisticated, and we evolved things like railroads and began to use electricity and nuclear power ultimately, and just all of the things that come with modern civilization, right, which really takes off in America, right, as a result of the Industrial Revolution post-Civil War. So as we evolve this more technologically complex society, right, it starts to no longer make sense to simply hire people to work for the federal government because of who they know, their connections, because they supported that president. That becomes increasingly dysfunctional and actually dangerous, right? When you're dealing with electricity, which early days killed a lot of people, many thought it could never be brought under our tight control and made useful. So it was hard work to get it under control, and you needed, right, bureaucrats with expertise and competence and knowledge and experience. So that became the the new approach, right? It was called civil service reform, late 19th century, and the idea was, let's make sure that most people who work for the federal government are not subject to patronage politics, are not hired just because of loyalty or who they supported, because they're a party man or party woman. None of that, right? This is make it professional, right? You still want the leadership class to be beholden to the president, responsive to the president, accountable to the only elected official in the executive branch. But for the most part, right, you want to sort of create accountability through the leadership team, and then professionalism through rank and file everyday federal workers. And that's been the model that we've pursued. And we've even given the federal bureaucracy a lot of degrees of freedom to do their job as they see fit, even those put there by the president, where the president doesn't micromanage them. Although if the president ultimately is dissatisfied with their performance, of course, the president has always been able to fire them unilaterally at will. So that's all under challenge now by the Trump administration, which is making the case for a much more unified executive branch, where all power is centralized in one person. It's all about democratic accountability to the president and less about professionalism, expertise, experience, knowledge, excellence. The only real question is, are you a buddy of the president, loyal to the president, a member of the president's party, up and down the bureaucracy? And that's been the move by Trump as part of this, what's called the unified executive theory. It's interesting. It's quite experimental. I think it's a sketchy experiment myself. But that's certainly what we're trying out today, is a federal bureaucracy that's less about performance and excellence and more about patronage, loyalty, and centralized power. All right. And then, of course, right, the Nevada executive branch, we'll see that bears some similarities to the federal executive branch, but also some big differences. We do have a plural executive here in Nevada, right? 6 statewide elected officials, from the governor all the way down to, I think it's the controller, Nevada's top accountant. Why we elect our top accountant, I don't know. But the idea is, right, you decentralize that executive power. And that's a big difference, right? I'm not saying that would necessarily work at the federal level, but it's what we do at the state level. I think all states have some version of that. Yeah, and then there's again, similarities and differences, but that's a big difference. All right, so we're going to leave it there, and those PowerPoint slides I have for you guys lays out both of those topics: federal bureaucratic politics, Nevada executive branch politics, in much more detail.